I'm helping here on my side to Eugene, but he mostly would like to talk about Deus Ex. But if you would like to talk about other projects, I am personally interested in other projects too, but maybe we'll
Oh,
probably
I'm
gonna
okay with the Deus Ex stuff. I mean,
okay.
it's been a long time, so if you ask me about
Yeah.
specific characters, I might go, I can't remember that, but I can remember most of the stuff. And
That's great. We
Great,
give you some
great.
like in our questions, we prepared you some details for so you can reference that. And yeah, if you're ready, we're good to go.
let's go.
Cool.
Great.
Let's do that.
Um,
We're gonna start with kind of so the question is we are international, okay? So we were trying to figure out how to correctly pronounce your last name. Is it Mark Cecere?
It's actually Cecere.
Chachary, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. We need it because we couldn't translate in other languages. Chachary.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark Chachary. It's not a lot of information about you in the internet. We found your IMDb, no picture for some reason. You have picture in LinkedIn. Some of the sites, who mostly talk about games. It's a little bit more information about you there. But first, could you tell us about yourself and the project you've been working on? Could you?
Like from the beginning, kind of, or right now?
If you can, from the beginning, but
From the
brief
beginning.
history.
Okay, so I was a programmer when I was in teenager, but programming at home because back then there was no industry for that really. So I did programming and writing for myself for a long time. And eventually, by the time I'd done a couple of university degrees, I realized I didn't have a job. So I went into actual learning how to program, and that's how I got into gaming. Now, I was gaming on my own, but I didn't get into development until much later. And eventually, there were studios that were looking around for people to program, and I jumped in as a programmer, but I was much more of a writer. And so 3 months later, they realized I wasn't much of a programmer. And I jumped right into the production side and the writing side. And that was in a small studio in Montreal. They were doing strategy games mostly. You might know the Disciples series. This is from a long time ago, but I worked with them, and that's where I got my start. But ultimately, my passion was always sci-fi and fantasy as a youngster, and originally cyberpunk was a big thing. So when I first played the first Deus Ex, I was really into it, and then I got a chance to re-up in the IP when they restarted in 2007 or 8, and that was a big thrill. And the other game that I was going to work on in the same studio was Thief, which was another of my favorites from early in the 2000s. I just got lucky to get the Deus Ex job at the time.
Thank you. Yeah, you've been working a lot as the yeah, I checked your portfolio and it says you've been working a lot as a lead designer, level design, text editor, and then you jumped on another project as the writer to Deus Ex.
Yeah, well, what happened early on, there was very few writer positions in the game industry in those years. You had to get in as something else because there was no position as true writer. Usually the writing was done by somebody on the team. And at the time, I was like I said, a programmer and a producer or a level designer. But because I could write, I kept getting the jobs to write for the small projects all over. And eventually what happens is many studios started realizing that they need dedicated writers on a lot of these bigger projects, the narrative projects. And so since then, the last, I would say 15 to 18 years, many studios have that position. But at the beginning, when I started, there was no such position. So you had to be lucky to be in the right position, be in the right place to get into there.
Oh, well, I
Yeah.
never thought about that.
Yeah, there was no such thing because first of all, the games weren't the same style as they are now. Now you have big open world narrative games, but back then it wasn't so much that way. So, the level designer would create their level and do the writing at the same time. But then the quality was less, and then eventually everything got everybody specialized.
I guess it's somehow connected to the movies because
Oh yeah,
because
very
the
much so.
viewer became more demanding and demanding on development story.
That's
That's
exactly what
interesting.
happened.
That's interesting.
And in
Uh,
fact, the evolution of the gaming industry is very much like the evolution of early movie industry. It's
mm,
very similar. At the beginning, everybody did all kinds of things. There were fewer people in the studio, and then everybody got specific jobs as they got bigger and bigger.
yeah, we can definitely see it like this in Deus Ex project, like these cinematic scenes there. They already use it there. Could you give us a little more? How did you get actually involved in this project? You told about your experience, but um, how did you get involved into this? Like Deus Ex, it's a big project, so was
It's
there
a
a
very big project. Early on, I wasn't even in that studio. A friend of mine had gotten the sound designer job for Deus Ex out of the earlier studio that we worked at, and he told me that they were starting up Deus Ex again, and I went crazy. So I started writing up essays and papers and analyses of the earlier game and my knowledge of uh, of cyberpunk in general, cyber noir, and of the Deus Ex original Deus Ex game. And I kept giving it to him, and he kept passing it on to the people in the company who were doing the hiring. And eventually, they needed somebody to come in and write, because early on there was only two writers on the team for Deus Ex. So I came in as the third one, and that I just got lucky to have somebody who was in the studio already, and to tell them how much I in terms of lore I knew a lot compared to some of the people who were already there. So they needed somebody who could bridge the two, because they knew they wanted the IP had to be related to the first one in some way. At that time, I think they had just sort of decided to make it a prequel. And so then it was a question of how to set up things in our Deus Ex so that it makes sense going into the game that was already existing, if you know what I mean, in terms of
mm,
narrative, anyway. So I like that. That's how I got in. I got in by pushing and being lucky and being at the right place at the right time. Because the other thing is, it was happening in the same city that I lived in, and if it hadn't, well, there was no working from home at that time or
mm-hmm.
from across the country. You had to be there and be in the studio.
Pushing and being lucky. This is the advice we get from all other guests. It's like how all they get into the industry.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy getting into it's really hard to get into writing for games, but uh, even just getting into the game industry is not that easy.
We know that Human Revolution and Mankind Divided maintain the same approach to the character development as in the earlier games. Warren Spector didn't want to provide too much backstory for the main character, so that players could experience the world of the game through their eyes, interpret and dance. However, in Human Revolution, a curious and attentive player can uncover a lot about the character's history. There are very small details in there, like genetic experiments in childhood, being saved by his parents, his adoptive parents, right?
Yeah.
His apartment also says a lot about him. The broken mirror, post-traumatic stress disorder, maybe it reflects this. Issues with self-acceptance. And why did the writing team decide to explore the character's backstory so deeply?
It goes back to what I just said before, is to try and set up something that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the sense of gaming at the time was a little different. So one day Deus Ex came back, and I played the original. It was really a blank slate. Jessie Denton is you as the player. Uh, by the time we were doing our game, gaming had changed a little in how it portrayed lead characters. There was some that were really pure RPG style where it's you playing a role, and there were others that became what's called immersive sims, uh, which is you taking on an existing role. So the decision was made to do it this way because we had a very strong character design. We had a very distinct thematics that we wanted to address, and so we thought it was important to do all that. And especially, actually, we go even more into the backstory of Jensen in Mankind Divided than we do in HR. That was because it had become a Jensen story by that time. The HR was a Jensen story, but we didn't know how Jensen would become such a kind of an icon, especially in the cyberpunk world. So all of a sudden we had the second Jensen game, and so we went more into the Jensen background, or we gave out a little bit more of the Jensen background, like you said, all the experimentation and the genetic manipulation and stuff like that. So that's really the reason, is that I think the state of gaming at the time wanted that, but also we made a conscious decision that it was not going to be this. It was going to be immersive sim, and also the first person, like third person type of thing, So I think it was a strong character design, and so it made sense to have him be a character.
It's a very rare thing now. That's why I'm asking, because most of the characters already has their background in the movies or in the books.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's original story.
Exactly. But at the time, it wasn't. It was not the way it was done. Which is interesting. It was just the start of things. Even like things like the original Far Cry was really a nobody. But by the time you got to Far Cry 3, the main character that you're playing has a bit more of a personality. And so the same thing with Jensen.
Okay, it's clear about Jensen. What about Megan Reed? The game provides plenty of details about Megan Reed. We know she experimented with Jensen's DNA and even compared her discovery to the Rosetta Stone, one of the greatest discoveries that essentially starts the human revolution era. However, it feels like Megan Reed's story and her perspective on what's happening was lacking as to the player, because what we have is only their fated relationship. Her love got seen closer to the end of the game, and it seems that they did indeed have affection for each other before David discovered Jensen's history, but we never find out how Megan truly feels about Adam. Does she really love him? Did he just become her Rosetta Stone, or there is a little more in Mankind Divided. Like, we learned that they broken up and she's moved to another city. Why did you decide to pay so little attention to their relationship?
I think at the time we weren't really into exploring relationships. It was really big thematics, and so maybe now that wouldn't be acceptable. At the time, it was a straight path. It's a Jensen story and what's happening around this. And yes, we needed that urge for Jensen to start, because the urge to start is basically she's kidnapped and he's almost killed, right? So part of it is trying to find her. Part of him is trying to find himself, if you want to call it that. But very soon, things just race out of control. And so we just thought at the time, yeah, we can give little hints that they had a relationship, that, there's still a faction out there that are saying, she used him and she's a bitch and stuff like that. Fine. The truth is she was a scientist trying to get ahead. She happened to use Jensen DNA in an experiment. Not a smart move, but not because she's evil. She just happened to use it, and lo and behold, this thing came out, and it went out of control for both of them. I don't know that it would have served anything to examine the relationship between them from her side. I think we did get some from his side, but in terms of how the game played out, I don't know that it would have served anything to really examine his feelings on it. Maybe it would have. I don't, it's hard to tell at this point, but it wasn't our interest to do that. Our interest was really to examine this much greater theme than interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, I got it. I guess it depends.
I'm not
sometimes.
sure that's a good decision. It's just a decision. Maybe it's a better, but I think if we do that, we go down a different type of game.
That's
Maybe.
interesting. It depends on time. Yeah, that's.
I think it's also a scope thing. You know, already we had to cut a lot from the original games, so you know, if we had to cut something, that would have been something we would have cut anyway, because we're trying. There's so much to fit in, and the same thing with Mankind Divided. There's a lot of things that were cut. If we start putting uh, uh, what do you call it? Emotional sort of uh, problems in there, then we're losing on what other things we're trying to do. It's a choice you have to make. It's, I guess, at some point, and we went more of the sort of hard sci-fi angle instead of the emotional attachment angle, which a lot of people do, but whatever. Yeah.
Thank you. Eugene, do you have a question? I think you had a question.
Yes, I have. Sometimes I will speak in Russian because I'm not good in English.
That's okay.
Я бы хотел спросить, вы сказали, что какие-то вещи были вырезаны из Human Revolution и Mankind Divided. Какие именно это вещи были?
As you mentioned, some of the things were cut out Human Divided. What could you call what things were cut? What did you have?
Yeah,
a
couple of things. Well, in Human Revolution, for sure, a whole area was cut out. So there was when you go to Hengsha, you never go to Upper Hengsha, right? But we had an Upper Hengsha for a long while, and some sections were going back and forth, and it was a much bigger, like the area where we find, I think it's Van Bruggen in the little pod, in the pod hotel. That was supposed to be on Upper Hengsha. We had a whole bunch of things, so that whole thing was cut. In Mankind Divided, Rabia was supposed to be in the game, so the Og City was supposed to be in there. So that was cut, and we had to change all kinds of things to make it a shorter game. And we all know the sort of problems that had. There were some issues with people, how it ended and all that. Yeah, it ended that way because we ran out of time, or they wanted the game out, and that's what happened. But yeah, it was supposed to be much more of an arc where you go from Prague to Rabia in the desert, and eventually some of that desert setting was actually removed and put in the beginning, where you go to Dubai to start the whole game of Mankind Divided. Well, that was actually partially Rabia earlier. So a lot of things happened to try and to make it as smooth as possible, but obviously when you cut stuff, there are holes that are left, and you don't always catch all the holes in the narrative or in the gameplay.
Do you see how some concept arts or some other additional materials each one can reflect back to the game?
I don't have concept art. I have a lot of Word docs. Obviously, I have all the game files and stuff especially from HR, some of the Mankind Divided stuff, but I don't have any concept art except I have a bunch of character bios with little, what do you call it? Not concept art, but pastiche of what we wanted the characters to look like, and character bios like that. But I never took any of the concept art. I thought that was off limits for us. So I'm sure some of the concept artists have some of their stuff, but not I.
Хорошо. У меня есть еще один вопрос. Я не силен в древнегреческой мифологии, религиозной в том числе, но несложно заметить, что у персонажей говорящие имена. То есть Адам, который, подобно персонажу из Библии, срывает плод этих технологий, становится плод человеком. Также есть Меган, которая, по сути, та же Ева. И Адам попадает в обстоятельства, которых никогда не просил. Вот. Действительно ли была какая-то древнегреческая и религиозная мифология, и как сами мифы отражаются в сюжете игры?
He says he's about ancient Greek and religious mythology in the game. It's not hard to notice that the characters' names have meaningful names. Like Adam is the character from the Bible. he like takes this forbidden fruit of technology and becomes a post-human. We even have his in the game we have like his own Eve. I guess this is Megan.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is that Adam never asked for this life, right? He doesn't take this fruit willingly. Is this decision made for him by Megan?
The decision to be augmented?
Yes.
The decision to be augmented is actually made by Seraph.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So what happens in the beginning, if I remember correctly, there's the attack. They take Megan and Adam is almost killed. Now, David knows what Megan knows to a certain extent. He decides to have Adam fully done. So when he says, I didn't ask for it, it's David that's really responsible for making him augmented. David Seraph's motivation for that is left open. We know, I mean, we're pretty, when you see interaction, you know that David and Jensen are close in a way. There's a little bit father-son there. There's a little bit of everything. But David also knows the genetics of Adam at some point. So we left it open as to, you know, how, what goes into David's decision to do that. Is it only to save Adam's life? Is it for something else? We don't want to answer that. I don't want to answer it. I just want to let it out there. Let people make their own decisions. I have my feeling is that David did it to save his life. That was Seraph's motivation for making his Aug company in the first place, to make people better, to make life better. So I think he's true to that. What happens after? Well, you know, because of Adam's DNA, well, his DNA is not his fault. It's the Illuminati's fault. It's Majestic 12 that made him the way he is. So, you know, who's at fault really? You know, we don't know.
I guess I have ongoing questions since you mentioned that. His name also refers like the biblical character who fought Goliath, right? And from his lineage, Messiah is supposed to come. So does David versus Goliath may have a basis in a position between David and Bill Taggart?
Not an obvious one. We didn't really go down. It wasn't the David and Goliath for him. For us, we were more banking on the Seraph angle, which Seraph is seraphim, which is an angel.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes along with the logo for the company, and even the what is it, the dream sort of cinematic where Adam is rising with wings. That was more of the impetus for that naming of the character. Well, we didn't do that for all characters with their names, but a bunch of them we certainly did. And that comes from the original Deus Ex, right? With the AI names, the names of the AIs. Well, we carry some of that along to sort of give a little bit more of, and that's why we tried to, as a prequel, you try to bridge the gap between those two things by little clues like that.
Yeah, that's a lot of speaking names, like talking to speaking names in there, like which already tells us the story about the characters. It helps a lot.
It does, and it's not just to help the story, but it's just to give a little bit of narrative weight to stuff that maybe not consciously the player gets. You know, Icarus and Daedalus and Morpheus and all these things go in your head. Maybe you don't pay attention, but you've heard those names before from something else. So you give them little things like that. And it's something we do in real life anyway, right? We name things like, you know, every car name is named after, you know, some god or something, right?
Yeah.
So we do that in real life, and we probably would do it with augmentations and companies and everything else.
So speaking about, I guess I'm going on with this religion symbolism here. Like the global apartheid that happens in the story is literally the result of the Tower of Babel construction, where humans wanted to rise to the heavens and become as powerful as gods. This also aligns with the appearance of new criminal groups and power structures in Mankind Divided, even the squad Adam works in. Is it true that the story interprets religious narratives here too? What other religious narratives influence the plot we can actually follow in the game?
There were no real, I mean, we didn't use any religious narratives as a guide in any way. What we were using as a guide is one big question in whatever game. So the big question is, or a thematic question in Human Revolution is, what does it mean to be human? That was the question that we had in our heads all the time as writers and conceptors. And anything you had a question about, you were writing it, you just throw it again. What does it mean to be human when it's this, when it's that? And then you'd answer that question a bit in whatever it is. So the question of Augs, what does it mean to be human? Well, at what point are you still human if you're not, you chop off an arm? Well, okay, you can say that's not such a big thing because we have that already. Okay, what is it still human if you're implanting things in your brain? Are you still human if you do this? So that was the question we were doing. It wasn't really a religious thing, even though we were using a lot of iconography and names that way, if that makes sense. We were using it as a sense of, because it's Deus Ex, it's God from the machine. Well, now we're making a machine. We're the ones who are God because we're making this hybrid. Are we making humans? Are we making machines? What are we making, right? So that's the sort of religious aspect I think we were going for, not necessarily based in any specific ideology, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes sense. So in terms of the game plot, what do you think, according to you? Is Adam more of a machine or more of a human character?
Well, okay, the funny thing about that is we want to leave that to the player, is that you went around killing everybody. Are you a machine? Did you lose your humanity? If you went the foxiest of the hounds, for example, if I remember correctly of the achievement, are you less of a machine, more of a machine? It's hard to tell because I think at some point you see just how augmented Adam is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's ridiculous. It's like, well, is that really a human? And so the idea was to bring, forget the body, let's focus on the Adam mind. And that's why we wanted to, all the choices in the games are that if you can still make choices, maybe you're still human. But if you're making, it doesn't really matter if you're making the bad choices or the good choices. At least you get to make a choice. But it was never the intention to give answers about this. It was just to raise questions about it. Here it is. What does it mean to be human? And leave it in the player's hands. Our personal thing, I think Adam is, yes, still human on a personal level. But, everybody who plays it will have a different little take on it.
As long as he has a choice.
As long as he has a choice, at least for me, you can, he's fighting these people. And even if you want to throw in the whole, angle of, is it still really Adam, in Mankind Divided? I don't know that it makes a difference if he's fighting. Right? Some people are saying he's a clone or whatever. Yeah, okay. So I'm not going to answer those questions because I don't have the answers. In my head, it's just a lot of questions. That was Deus Ex. The original Deus Ex to me was that. It was raising a lot of questions and having to think about it, and then going back and replaying and checking in every hole and going, was there an answer there? I don't know. And then getting frustrated, but then really liking it because you're having to dig for stuff. So I think that was the idea of the follow-ups, is to not give answers.
Yeah,
even one of the, I would say one of the iffy parts is that at the beginning of Mankind, there was a lot of people wondering, what about the choice in HR? What about our choice? Did that have any influence on anything? And my response was always, no, it didn't. People believe what they want to believe. We've just had it happen. If you want to, I'm not going to raise COVID, but we've just had it happen with COVID, right? Everybody has their own opinion about what happened, no matter what people say or put in the news. So my idea was, after Adam makes his choice at Panchaea to either broadcast the truth or not the truth, it doesn't matter in the world after. People believe it or not believe it, and so there was no real repercussions except that a lot of people died. That's the real repercussion. So
Okay, sounds like modern media now. We can believe it or not.
yeah, well, that was the point of it. And Eliza was that kind of media when we made it, before it ever happened, 10, 15 years ago. That was Eliza. She was telling you whatever she wanted, and then, is it the truth? It doesn't matter. People believe it or not. And it's kind of like where we're at now, which is weird.
Seems like he has some technical problems, but I think we'll just go on and wait for... he will connect sooner or later.
Oh, there he goes.
Back.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back.
You are
I
back,
fixed it.
and you are back with the question, right?
Окей, да, yes, I have a question. Это очень глупый вопрос сейчас будет, но мне кажется, Адаму совершенно не везет с женщинами. У него первая его женщина ставила эксперименты на ДНК, Джао вообще себя убила при подключении к компьютеру Херон, а Элиза Касан вообще голограмма. Может быть, ему стоило хоть раз с цветочками подойти к Фрэнку Причарду?
Yeah, I'll translate it, but it sounds like a very personal perspective right now. I'll tell you why. He asks, might be sound like a silly question, but it seems to me that Adam has a terrible luck with women. And that's why I'm saying. The first one experimented on his DNA. Jao killed herself while connected to the supercomputer Heron. And Eliza Kazan is just a hologram, right?
Yeah.
Was there any intention to give Adam a chance to a healthy relationship? Maybe he should buy flowers. Just one.
I don't know if he's a flower man, but he definitely show up with a bottle of something. There was some talk in the Mankind Divided to have something with Vega early on, and in the first one there was a little bit with I forget her name, the helicopter pilot.
I forgot too.
Yeah, but there was a little bit of interplay there.
Malik, по-моему, maybe
Malik. Yeah, it's Farida Malik. And like I said, in the second one, possibly Vega. There's some little hints of him flirting with a bunch of women, even Delara in the second one. Again, it became a thing where Adam was so damaged, and we kind of made it part of the whole thing we were talking about, what it means to be human, and that he thought he was losing it, right? Like broken mirror and a bunch of things about like, I didn't ask for this. So at some point, I think we started ignoring that part of it because we didn't want to delve into that very much more personal thing. But I think he might have been healthier if he made an attempt and brought some flowers to somebody. On the other hand, he's basically a machine, so I don't know how far that goes.
Let me ask a question, please. Мне кажется, что вполне могла бы получиться какая-то связь у Адама как раз-таки с Малика, потому что она единственная, кто его поддерживала из женских персонажей в игре. Но почему в Mankind Divided от нее осталась только одна лишь пасхалка?
Yeah, he says that it might work with Malik character, like their relationship, they could build something, because he was only one supportive character there who supports Adam. But why? What was the decision not to show her in Mankind Divided? There's not a lot of her character there.
Yeah, part of the reason was that she was a borderline character in the first one, in that she could die. She might have died, and so they didn't want to take some of the position of taking that decision for the character. I didn't particularly agree at the time, but that was the real reason that Malik never made it. I think at some point after HR, after Human Revolution, we went along and we said, these are the things that we have to take decisions on that were a decision in the past game, in case somebody plays the new game and does their you have to start them off at a point where all these things happen. and Malik was, I think, officially dead in that version. That's the only thing.
Но, тем не менее, там была
пасхалка. Just to say one other thing, by the way, the other character that is very sort of positive but negative on Jensen is Pritchard. A lot of people sleep on Pritchard, but Pritchard is the man. He stands up for, he doesn't like him for various reasons, but he's always behind Adam and he gives him the right info. He's just not as sexy as Farida.
No, we have two supportive characters.
Well, for some people, I guess. I don't know.
Two supportive characters. Yeah, that's a lot.
Well, compared to everybody else who is trying to use him a bit, that's the impression. Everybody's trying to use him. Those two are not trying to use him.
We take a slight turn here to maybe movie perspective. The question is, do you think Denis Villeneuve played Deus Ex? It seems to us that the plot of Blade 2049, if you watched it, partially repeats the story of Deus Ex character. Have you watched the?
Yeah. It's there's a lot of similarities. But I don't, I never had any contact with those people. And definitely there was, at some point, there was a Deus Ex movie project in the works for years. Maybe we should ask Denis Villeneuve, but I'm sure there's not. But a lot of what we did is very universal. And so that's why it pops up in a lot of different areas. It's just the take on it is a little different. And people who watch all these things can find those things because that's what they watch. If you're taking a lot of cyberpunk, if you're taking a lot of sci-fi, you will see these things and you can find similarities, even though maybe they're not that similar, they're similar. So I'm not surprised. It's very same thematic, right? I mean, even the original Blade Runner sort of has that.
Right. I guess we can also see the same out of the Matrix too.
Exactly. And especially the aesthetic is very similar, right? Very dark, always night. It's always raining. It's wet.
Oh yeah.
Everything's like, from the original Blade Runner movie, a lot of it came from that, and it's carried over the years.
Later, yeah, that's true. I mean, later on we see this game, Detroit Become Human. It also happens in Detroit, right? So it's like
exactly. And Detroit was for us was a callback to the auto industry because it was the same kind of. It was falling apart because of technology, and so we said, Detroit's kind of an interesting area where the same thing might happen. And it's like we said about the names, you just put something out there that might spark something in somebody, even though they don't notice it consciously.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I guess we're talking about like same source of inspiration, right? But what actually inspired you what inspired you to write the Deus Ex?
I had been into cyberpunk since it started. It's something that I read. I read all the Gibson novels, Sterling, Rucker, Neil Stephenson's. I read all those when I was in, elementary school and high school, and it formed a bunch of things in me. At the time, that was, all this stuff was not even existent, right? We couldn't do this at the time. We couldn't have this interview back then. This was all in books. So it was very interesting to read that stuff. And then, 5-10 years later, that stuff is happening. The internet is happening, even though I'd read about it in a novel 10 years before. So when Deus Ex the game came out, I've played a bunch of games, and I've played many cyberpunk style games, and the original Deus Ex was really beyond that because it was actually reflecting what was out there a little bit, this grand conspiracies and stuff. I have a head that enjoys that stuff, so when I had the chance, I jumped at it too. That's the inspiration. It's just having experienced all or read and watched all kinds of that stuff before and really liked it. And originally I just really liked noir novels, film noir from the 50s, 40s, 30s. I love that stuff. So you combine the two, this high tech, what they call, cyberpunk, high tech, low life. That's amazing for me. That's bread and butter for me.
Eugene prepared the question about like ongoing question about the books. I'm not sure if you mentioned this one, but in the world of Mankind Divided, there are fragments from the works of Karel Čapek. Have you heard about him? This man literally changed the perception of the science fiction genre and made it be considered on par with other literary forms. The theme of the game partly echoes Rossum's Universal Robots, where the question of allowing humans to use artificial beings is explored, and that could lead to. Even the director of the Robot Factory states that his goal is to disprove the existence of God by creating artificial people without emotions, desires, or needs. He says it feels like you've seen a version of this story in Detroit, as we discussed, but how does this tie into the world of Deus Ex?
Not directly. Not directly. The only way it ties in is most of us read or watched Robots from a long time ago. Like I had read it before. A lot of the team read it for research and did a bunch of other early sci-fi, early cyberpunk stuff. I was hugely into Philip K. Dick stuff, which impacts everything I wrote in Deus Ex for sure, the perception and stuff like that. So robots, in terms of controlling, like I said, is not directly linked with Deus Ex, but is sort of, if you wanted to look at it, is the Illuminati angle. That's what they're trying to do. Majestic 12 and Illuminati, that's what they're trying to do. Not necessarily create robots to replace, but to control people, to control humans. That's what they're trying to do. So it's not directly linked, but it's definitely a thematic that the Illuminati were following, and that the original Deus Ex is sort of based on, if you want that's what it is, right? The Gray Death and all that. It's just a group trying to control people in any way they can. We had augmentations in ours. Deus Ex had the Gray Death and pharmaceutical, not augmentation, but pharmaceutical, the Jessie Denton version, and the pharmaceutical guys, of course. But so that's the approach of the Illuminati side of the argument, is that, and just to be completely clear, is that we never approach the Illuminati as evil guys. Mm-hmm. That was not the point. There's no good and evil. Illuminati have a goal, and this is what they're trying to do. Their goal is altruistic. Their goal is the betterment of people. How they do it, that's a different story. And so that's what Jensen is fighting, really, at first, is how they're doing it. Later on, you get into, does he fight them actually doing it? And that's why you have the choices at the end. Do you let them do it? Do you keep them from doing it? Well, there's no good choice. There's a good choice in your own head, but there's no best choice, we hope.
Oh, we are going to return to the Illuminati thing later on.
Uh-oh. I stepped in it now.
Right. Yeah, but the choices and the emotions. Adam Jensen, from the very beginning, he ceased to be an independent character, like very independent. But until the very end, almost all decisions, except those dictated by the survival instinct, like ticking bomb, 10-second timer, they are made for him by the player and other characters. David Pritchard, Eliza, he literally immerses himself in his work and almost never addresses his personal life. It's a little strange maybe to a player, but after completing the game, we had the feeling that, like the other characters, he was Adam was depriving of his own life, depriving him the right to make his own choice, even just once. Is this justified by gameplay mechanics only, or did the writing team intentionally avoid delving deeply into the character's emotions?
A lot of it is from the game mechanics, obviously. But some of it is written into the character, we hope, is that we say we always say the line, "I never asked for this," right? And there's a reason for that. Is that Adam feels he's constrained to a path by decisions made by others, but he's such a driven guy that he was going to do something. Now, maybe his choices are constrained because of all this, but in some ways, that's to me, that's the appeal of the game as a player, is that, you play this guy and yeah, you're constrained. It's a game environment. Of course you are. But hopefully enough comes across that it's a character that would have done something anyway, if he had the knowledge of what was going on. It just so happens that he was augmented and he has the ability to impact stuff. Whereas maybe as a normal human person, he would not have had that ability. Does that make sort of sense what I'm saying?
I guess it does make sense. But I still have like the question about the character motivation. Like, see, in the beginning when he recovers after a long period, after the prologue of human revolution, the game skips over a long period of Adam's recovery, right? He's like, retinal display is malfunctioning, his beloved woman is dead, and he has neither a body nor any plans for life. What motivates Adam to keep going at this point? Is it like a sense of duty, or you need to know why his girlfriend was brutally murdered? Because after that we see Adam, he goes to work, he has a cool coat and cool black glasses.
Yeah.
That's the whole story.
His motivation is, yes, at the beginning is clearly find Megan. It's interrupted by a bunch of stuff, right? The stuff that happens at Serif Manufacturing, the hostage situation. So he goes off and does that, gets the hostage, comes back. And then we start off with these other things that sort of are always interrupting, because he keeps finding information because of the situation that Megan is in and he is in. The information he finds keeps, it drives him towards Megan because that's where all the hints are, but it keeps uncovering these other things that, to me, he's powerless not to look into, because they are the basis for what's happening to him and the world, but to him in the immediate now. And so to me, because he's that kind of character, his motivation is just, I need to find this stuff out. And there are mysteries about himself that he still doesn't know, right? And when he hears a little hint of, say, oh yeah, you were at White Helix Labs when you were, what? I got to find out about this stuff. And it also, like I said, it just happens to be that Megan is on the same path. And so he's following all these lines and they're all leading to the same place. So to me, the motivation is, it's in his character to find things out. He's a tinkerer. I don't know. Some people have caught on to this. He loves watches. He loves clocks. This is what he does. He's minutia and details in a lot of things. And to me, that motivation reflects that interest. Just so happens that somebody he loved or still loves is in danger. Just so happens that they, maybe there's some revenge in there too. I mean, they destroyed him. So there's a lot of things that motivate him to go on and do this thing. The fact that he was a cop, that's a mental sort of state that maybe he never left, protection of people or stuff like that. So those are all thrown in there. They're not obvious, a lot of them, but you do what you can with when you're writing a character. And also you want to leave room for the player to do some stuff, to feel some stuff in there. You can't always have Adam put his feelings forward. You have to let the player have a chance to sort of experience it themselves. And that's sort of like the line you have to sort of tread on an immersive sim. Are you just playing that character completely? You have to have the player try and feel what the character feels, and the other way around.
из-за особенностей своей ДНК Адам не имеет необходимости принимать нейропозин, как всем остальным персонажам в этой игре. Почему именно такое решение было принято, чтобы отличать его от остальных? Вообще, как появился сам феномен этого нейропозина, который необходимо принимать всем остальным?
Because of his DNA, Adam doesn't need or even have the ability to use Neuroprosin, a drug that helps other augmented people prevent the rejection of implants by their bodies. How and why did you decide to do this, Adam, this special ability, I would say? And how did this idea happen? Was it like reflected?
The reason was the biggest reason you just said is to make him special. That's the big reason for sure. The other reason is we needed some mechanism whereby there's a good and a bad to having augmentations, and so we needed to have this thing that happens to people. It can't be I'll just go and chop off an arm and go and everything's fine. There's a price to pay, and it's not just money. There's other prices, and it's funny. We talked, Cyberpunk 2077 came up with a name for it, right? It's cyberpsychosis. Okay, well, that's their version. Our version is, hey, you got a whole bunch of things. You got to take neuroprosin. It costs a lot of money. You're going to be, slave to the pharmaceutical companies for this, blah blah blah. Not Adam. Adam's Adam. Like you said, biblically, he's Adam, and that was on purpose too. So the origin story of Adam, and it's not really been exposed in the game completely, but the origin of story of Adam is that the Illuminati were doing eugenics experiment and breeding programs for many years, since the 40s, since the 30s. And so they had DNA samples of many people. And what happened is at some point, a couple went in for, fertility treatment at a clinic. And the woman, her genetics popped up as, oh, this is prime. We need something from her. And so the Illuminati, being what they are, got rid of the husband, injected her with whatever. And that was Adam. And Adam was treated at that white helix until he was 5 years old, and they took his genetic material, and somehow he was rescued there, right, by the nurse and all that. It burned down. So the origin is that he is genetically advanced in some way, and one of the ways is that he's hyper receptive to things. He does not reject things in that way, and that's a huge step forward for certain projects that the Illuminati had in mind, but they never got a chance to go forward with Adam because he was not there. And so if you look even deeper, the Jessie Denton line is actually a thread of that DNA way down the line, where some other lab had, stem cells or whatever, and began their own version. Unknown, all these little cells and pockets of labs sort of working independently. And that's the Adam sort of DNA code, that how it impacts everything.
Хотел бы спросить, вот эта необходимость, точнее его особенность в том, что ему не нужен нейропозин, по сути, его делает постчеловеком, или даже своего рода мессией, если возвращаться к мифам. Если он действительно мессия из рода Голиафа, то, соответственно, у него тоже должны быть последователи определенные. Как раз-таки, может быть, Джесси Дентон как раз-таки один из них, или есть еще какие-то, или были какие-то еще идеи по другим персонажам?
Yeah, I really forgot the question. So the idea, he asks, can we just skip this question?
Well, are you getting at the back to the relationship between Seraph and Jensen? Is that it?
No, I just want to know Adam, because he don't have to
take the drugs.
He doesn't take the drugs, and it's kind of making him a messiah, right? And
and that was the point. Like we said before, the point is that he is special and different.
И это его делает своего рода постчеловеком. Или, как можно привязать это к мифологии обратно, он мессия из рода Давида.
And it makes him a post-human. And if you connect it back to mythology, he's like Messiah from the myths of David.
Yes, absolutely. And the reason, and it is the reason why the Illuminati want him when they discover that he's still him, right? At some point, Megan gave that information up, and that's why she's kidnapped. They don't know where that DNA is from, but she's got that DNA. And at some point, I don't think she ever gives up that it's him, but because he's sticking his nose in it, he's always, he's rushing after them. They figure out, oh, that's the guy. That's the DNA we've been looking for 30 years or whatever. So yes, Messiah, yeah, that's a good word for it if you want to call it, or human 2.0 or whatever. It's the goal. It was the goal of the Illuminati originally, like I said, in the White Helix, is to make this new type of human. We never got into what they were trying to do with it. It certainly wasn't for augmentations, because augmentations didn't exist, but they were trying to advance the human race in some way. And it was Adam as a baby. Then they lost him. And what happened is, by pure chance, Megan took his DNA for whatever, because she was doing an experiment. Oh, I'll use my boyfriend's DNA. Stupid, but she did it, And then it was on the map again. And the Illuminati has fingers everywhere. And so they grabbed Megan out of Seraph and had her work for them with that DNA. But she never gave up, I don't think, that it was actually Adam. Maybe later, I don't know. But the fact that Adam chased them down, well, now they know, right? And by the time Mankind Divided, or even at the end of HR, they know he exists, and they want him.
Вот. И тут вопрос был в том, что у любого мессии должны быть последователи. Может ли им быть как раз-таки Джесси Дентон из самой первой Deus Ex?
Yeah, so the ongoing question to that, every Messiah has followers, right? So can Jessie
Denton.
Can Jessie Denton be one of them?
Possibly. The thing is, there was never a plan to have those two as physically together, right? Other than the hint that they are genetically related in some way. I'll just throw that out there because I know a lot of people don't like that it's connected, but if we're going with the fact that Adam is the progenitor of this kind of stuff, then I'm fine with the fact that the Illuminati in various labs use that DNA to maybe get Jessie Denton. I don't know as a follower, but definitely as someone who follows him in that track, yes. In terms of Messiah and followers, we never really went into that. There was some talk of that because of when he went into in Mankind Divided. He's part of the task force. But then we realized that it didn't really make sense, because the task force eventually becomes something else. They're sort of precursors to UNATCO. And then we thought maybe the Juggernaut Collective, that would be sort of that kind of thing. But we sort of pulled away from that too. In terms of followers, it wasn't a question that came up. But in terms of spiritual followers, like you said, I think maybe Denton is kind of like that. It's the next iteration of Adam, if that makes sense.
Immanuel Kant said that humanity is the ability to influence the destinies of other people. At the end of the game, Adam determines the fate of humanity after an intellectual battle with Hugh Darrow, right? Yeah. Did this make him more human? Will he remain human after making the most cynical decision of his life? I guess it's again about the choice, and we can interpret as we...
It's basically an interpretation. I think he's human because he can make that choice. That's what I think. The result of the choice doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Basically. Like, I mean, if we had a very evil choice, then I would say something else. But there's no really evil choice. You have to make a choice. Something's happening and you're going to do something. And Adam, like I said before, he's in a position to do it and has the mentality to do it, and so he does it. The fact that that choice doesn't play out necessarily the way he wants, I think, has no bearing on the fact that that he is human. Yes.
Is there? I'll still try to.
No, it's okay.
See, there's the final battle with huge Daryl and the main character Adam at this factory, and they're both different, right? Adam has the one who has special ability, about we talked before, and Hugh Darrow, he's like inventor, but he can't use his inventions, which is
he's the opposite.
A long irony. Hugh decided to organize the attack on the factory in the end, which triggered all the subsequent events, right? Other elements of a struggle at the level of who is more human in the end, like this fight between Hugh and Adam. One saves life, right?
I don't think there is, but I think there would be in Hugh's mind. I think in Darrow's mind, there's definitely that question, and that's part of that whole when they have the discussion battle with him. I think that's part of the whole thing, is that whether you can convince him that you are in a way still human or not, right? And then that changes what he says or what he does. But yeah, I don't think there is a question between the two of them who is more human, because like I said, it's not a black or white thing. What Darrow did, it's horrible, but his motivation was was fine. It makes sense to him, right? It makes sense that I got to stop this. I have to stop this. We're going down the bad way. For a bunch of other people, they're going to suffer. Yes, but I have to do it. The Jensen choice is him making the same kind of choice. Everybody's going to suffer no matter what I do. So I have to make that choice. So to me, it's not between the two of them who's more human. It's the fact that, yes, definitely, as the player, you're going to look at Darrow and go, he's less human. But as Darrow, you're going to go, no, Jensen's less human.
Right, you kind of lay this responsibility on the shoulders of the players, right? It's
kind of. And in a way, that's the point of the whole game, right? That was the question. Are you human? Here, make a choice. Make this choice. And so, people are adamant about what the choices they make. This is the right choice because, that's the more human choice. No, but this is the better choice. But but is it the right choice? Who says? That's the point. The point is everybody has their choice to make, and you're going to validate that choice most of the time. But it doesn't mean that it's a better choice. Somebody else will say something else.
Yeah, that's true perspective of view. Eugene?
Действие Human Revolution происходит в 2027 году, а ее сценарий был написан более 15 лет назад. И вот сейчас мы к 27 году ближе, чем к 2009 или 2011. Вот, оглядываясь в прошлое, можно ли сказать, что вы в чем-то были правы?
Human Revolution takes place in 2027, and its script was written more than 15 years ago. And looking back at the past, we are now closer to 2027, right, when it was before. So looking back at the past, can you say that you were right, in what way?
Oh, you mean this future we looked at?
Right, yeah.
I don't know if we were right, but when you're researching this kind of thing, you're really looking at what's happening in the world, and you just turn it up to 11, right? And maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. There are some things that are very, you look at and, wow, that's pretty close. There are some things that happen that are very, very close, but other things are way off. So, I mean, I can't even point to something except, if you were to think of COVID, that was in the game. We had plenty of epidemics, but when we were back then, everybody believed an epidemic would come eventually. So we just wrote it in. There's an epidemic happens here in 2019, blah, blah, blah. And then, we had one in real life. That happens a lot. Even the original Deus Ex had a bunch of stuff happen. Oh, that's surprising. It really happened. I think you throw a lot of darts at a board, and sometimes they just happen. But I can't even point to any right now off the top of my head that did happen. But
Well, you mentioned COVID, but it's kind of a negative thing. Are there like some positive things you may notice in real life similar to?
I'll be honest, I never thought of the game as very positive in any way.
Yeah.
So I'm looking and I go, it's pretty dark. No, I hope we don't have anything that's like that. I mean, I can't think of anything positive that is similar now that would be in the game. I don't think so.
Like,
Maybe you guys have something on the top of your head.
well,
but
the first thing I think about is like chip implants by, I think it was Elon Musk, right?
Well, okay, it's funny that you mentioned that because, like, I don't necessarily think of him as positive,
Right.
or people don't. So I look out there and I go, well, people don't think anything is positive, but people do. Like, people who are very into transhumanism will see a lot of things that are similar and positive. Chip implants, definitely. I've seen a lot of the augmentations that we came up with for the game. I did research on this with on a bunch of different websites, especially DoD, the Department of Defense spending, like advanced stuff. A lot of this stuff is coming or close, not to the extent of the augmentation in the game, but they're there. Are they positive? I don't know, maybe. So that's why I say, yeah, chip implants, yeah, that's the thing, but also a lot of people think it's negative.
So, and are you one of them? Like, because you wrote the story about the transhumanism, right? And augmentation. What is your opinion? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
I think it's one of those things that I can't say that it's good or bad. There's no good or bad until it's made good or bad by people. That makes sense. So I think we are in the last 20 years, we're in such a fast or swiftly changing technology thing that it's hard to see. It's hard to see if things are good or bad, and it's easy to see how they could turn bad because they're changing so quickly that we don't know what the repercussions of things are. So what are the repercussions of implanting a chip? We don't know. We have no idea. So if you're more of a, how can I say, conservative angle, you'll say, oh, we shouldn't do this because it could end up bad. And if you're more of a progressive angle, you're going to say, well, we got to try these things, right? So and that was the whole question the big question, especially at Mankind Divided, was for augmentations and in HR. Hey, is this dangerous or not dangerous? We made it a case where it could be dangerous, right? With the AUG incident, we said it could be dangerous. This could happen. Boom! Everybody goes crazy with the augments. But the reason we did that was to try and bridge the gap to the first Deus Ex, because the first Deus Ex, mechanical augmentations are gone. They're, like Anna Navarre and Gunther Herman, they are relics. Why would that happen in 20 years? The opposite should have happened, right? They should have got more better technology, but that's not what happened between HR and the original Deus Ex, which is 25 years, 22 years between the two. So something had to have happened. And we said, this is what happened. People went crazy, and then the rest of the world said, we don't do this no more. We're not doing this anymore with mechanical augmentations. That's why we made that choice to have that happen. If not, we might have went a different direction.
Thank you. This is an answer. I mean, honestly, it's okay. If we go further.
Подожди, у меня есть вопрос. Еще я хотел спросить про искусственный интеллект, потому что появление ведущей, как Элиза Касан, это просто дело времени. Вы к этому близки как никогда. Как вы относитесь к искусственному интеллекту? Пугает ли вас то, что сейчас появляется?
Я дополню, наверное, вопрос, как сценарист тоже интересно. Yeah, thank you for the question. Wonderful question. He asks about AI, right? Because it's just a question of time when they're gonna invent someone as what was the name's character? Sorry, какой был?
Элиза Касан.
Eliza
Eliza
Kassan.
Kassan.
Yeah, just a question. What's your personal opinion about the artificial intelligence? Maybe ChatGPT or something. And I have also personal question. I guess I'm studying to be a screenwriter, movies and TV. So what do you think about AI for the industry too? How's it going?
So what do I think about let's start with Eliza Cassan. I think you're right. We're going to get there, and actually, we're very close. I've seen some deep fake stuff that is very close to that. What do I think? I think it's gonna go through a lot of growing pains, and there will be some people who use it, much like augments, use it for bad, use it for good. It's going to be very difficult to distinguish between what's true and what's not. If whatever your definition of those words is, that's what I see, and that goes for the AI chatbots. That goes for all that stuff. What do I think about right now in AI chatbots? I've tried a bunch of them, and they're very far away from being any good at writing. Really. I did the same thing. I tried them all. I tried 4 or 5 of them: Grok, ChatGPT, Gemini, a bunch of them, just to see what comes out of there. And it's very generic stuff. That being the case, generic stuff sells, if you know what I mean. Like, there's a lot of generic entertainment out there that is, middle level, and it makes a lot of money. So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It can do it, but I've never seen anything of real good quality come out of a ChatGPT, out of an AI chatbot yet. And the truth is, that goes for art as well. For me, I can usually tell AI generated art of whatever kind. There's some that are tougher. Anything more comical actually can be done very simply. Anything more realistic is still way off. And I guess that's the same thing for writing. So good luck.
Thank you.
I think you still have time.
Right. I hope by my graduation I still can find a job. If I continue to talk about that, I'm on LinkedIn and I still get these messages like, because you're a screenwriter and a writer, you can now take the job as an AI teacher. It's like, why do I want to teach something that can do my job?
It's going to take my job. I'm going to teach it to take my job.
It's like,
no,
ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, they already used this writers' works right now. Ask them. So,
what I do see it as right now, if and I don't use it, but I know it can be used as a shortcut for a lot of things. Idea generation, formatting things. But even that is, what happens is, what I've noticed, and this is funny, you go from chatbot to chatbot with the same thing, and it generates very similar stuff. So that tells me the people who are teaching it similar stuff. And so you're going to get all this. It's going to become it's going to flatten a lot of things, right? Because it's really the same people that are teaching all of these bots. So when I gave, different prompts to write this, a paragraph on these things, and you realize when it's coming up with creative stuff, it's very similar. Even the names it comes up with for a little short story, I'm like, well, that's very much the same. So the chatbots are not differentiated. That's another thing I've noticed. AI chatbots are not differentiated. They're all very similar.
That's an interesting thought, because, like you say, the people who use the chatbots, right? They teach, I guess, their students in a similar way. So wow.
Yeah.
So we forget this concept about having this unique voice and stuff. And
right now, it's forgotten. If you use AI chatbots, it's forgotten. There's no unique voice. It's there.
Yeah.
The only one I've seen that's a little different is Grok, but that's because it's less constrained. There's less constraints on it put on it by the developers, I guess. So it can go off and do crazy stuff. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.